Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and today we are joined by, how would I explain this person? Talented, intellectual, intelligent, high EQ, it seems. But the person's name is Tyler, and I'm hoping we're going to say this right. Kenya?
Kenya. That was close.
Okay, close. Tyler is here today to talk with us about his book, The Maniac with No Knees. What an interesting title, too, right?
Yeah, that's me.
So as you know, you sent me the book, and
Yep.
I wanted to read it, and I think I read it. I was in a busy week. I picked up the first paragraph or first chapter, sorry, and I had to put it down for meetings. And then over the next 2 days, I finished reading the book. And I went back a couple times to different sections because, as I mentioned to you when I reached out to you when I was finished, I had a lot of visceral reactions to this book.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we start off by telling everybody what prompted
The
you to
Maniac
decide?
with No Knees.
Yeah, what prompted that?
I guess to go back a little, I was institutionalized for mental health issues, and while I was there, it's a pretty dark place. They don't really let you outside. There's not really much to do. No one's really talking. But I was inspired by a lot of these people who were suffering a lot worse than me. People with schizophrenia, people with aphasia. My roommate had aphasia. That's when you have difficulty talking because of a trauma. I formed a friendship with him, and I formed friendships with different people there, and they reminded me of my blessings. I'm pretty fortunate for all my illness and my trouble with my knees. I come from a wealthy family, a nuclear family that's educated, and I'm an athlete with good looks, and that kind of gives you just innate confidence. But I didn't really think a ton of it until I ruptured my patellar tendon for the second time. Now, a ruptured patellar tendon happens once for every 147,000 human years, and it's happened to me twice. And the second time it happened, I went manic, and I just started to tell my life story via the Notes app on Instagram. And, I had to get hospitalized for that manic episode. But when I got out, I had all this overwhelming support. And, everybody, people with bipolar, people without bipolar were just kind of cheering me on. And I kind of realized in that moment that it was my responsibility for all the outcasts of my affliction to kind of stand up, because a lot of us, for me, like, I had always been ashamed of who I was. I wasn't someone who shared stuff on social media. But when that manic episode kind of triggered all that, all you feel is righteousness when you're manic. You feel no inhibition. There's no risk tolerance, and you don't care what people think. So I just started telling my story. And it wasn't until I came out of that manic episode that I realized, okay, well, there's something to this. And, mental illness is heavily stigmatized. And, I took it upon myself to kind of say, okay, this is what it's like to, attempt suicide. This is what it's like to have manic episodes. This is what it's like to be institutionalized. And the book kind of wrote itself from there, to be honest. It's just my experiences.
So I loved the note at the beginning of the book was what really what compelled me to read it more, is you made sure people understood what your intentions were by using the word insane asylum, talking about suicide, those particular things. I thought that was really quite lovely. When you got into your chapter 1, I instantly made a note. You had said I'm not sure if everyone lives with this same little voice in their head, or if it's my own egotistical, slightly narcissistic, holier than thou syndrome. But even on my darkest, most suicidal days, there's always been this tiny voice in my head, confident that I would one day change the world. And I made a note to tell you that I have this voice too. And so I think this is really interesting, right? So here's the cool thing. We're looking at, for people, it's a great read. So I recommend people pick it up, especially if you, not even if you just, the story as it stands on its at its own, like what Tyler has gone through in this book and what he highlights about his time leading up from high school until when you wrote this book is a great story, just standalone, right? The other thing is if you struggle with any form of mental health, I think you could find a lot of parallels in this book as well, like certain things that may have happened to you. And if you know someone who's dealing with mental health, this book would be really great to read. So you have bipolar type 1.
Yes.
So for people who are at home, bipolar 1. Now, this is where my background's in mental health and DSM-5. So when I'm reading the book, I'm like, it's not screaming bipolar 1 to me, it's screaming bipolar 2. But I didn't diagnose you and I can't diagnose you. So, you know what I mean? I'm bipolar 2. So instead of manic episodes where I have hallucinations or anything where I feel like I might be connected to God, that's how I kind of categorize it. I have weird outbursts where I, like you, think that I'm invincible, very high risk tolerance. And I get very agitated with my surroundings and I just want to like sell off everything and move to Mexico. Like big grandiose decisions. But anyway, so you were bipolar 1. Where are you right now? If you could categorize yourself in this exact moment, where would you say on a scale you are?
I don't love to use scales,
Okay.
because our emotions and our well-being is constantly changing. And
Yeah.
I'm still struggling. Like this book has done a lot for me. This book has brought me confidence. This book has made me think that I'm making a difference in the world, and it's given me hope as far as my future goes. You know,
Yes.
and a lot of times when you're struggling with bipolar, like you're disassociating yourself from the world, and what you
Mhm.
need is a community to belong to and goals to have in mind that keep you waking up each morning and focused on whatever that goal is. So as far as that goes, I have those things, but I'm still struggling. Like I still have substance abuse problems like crazy. I still, I'm not suicidal now, but every single day I have thoughts of suicide. And there's a significant difference between the two, because when you're
Yeah.
suicidal, at least in my experience, it envelops you totally, and it's all you can think about. And I was having illusions of death, and I was keeping rope in my room, and I'm not there right now. But
I'm happy to hear that.
when something embarrassing or something, regretful, or I make a bad mistake, the first thing that comes to my mind, I close my eyes, I see a noose or I see a gun or something like that. And it's a fleeting moment. It leaves me right away, but it's still there and it's never going to leave me. And so that's what I want people to know, because a lot of bipolar, I hear from all kinds of people that are struggling, and they look at me like this pie in the sky, the other half of what bipolar can be. And in some regard, that's true, because I've gotten through the worst of my illness, and I'm to a point where I'm excited for my future rather than doomed by it, you know. But I'm still struggling.
I respect that and I can appreciate that, right? Because I think that there's an element when you deal with bipolar and mental health where there will always be some struggle. And it's, I want, for me, it's important to for me to help others understand that the limitation is only what we put on ourselves. We can do whatever we want to do. It's just harder than it is for a regular person who's not having this affliction, right? It's harder to maintain jobs, maintain normalcy, maintain housing, all of those things. It's harder. It's not impossible. It's just harder. We have more hurdles to climb through to maintain those things. And so you are talk about community. Community is very important. So I have a very small community, right? A very small support system, but they are like worth 100
Mm.
in how supported I am and how they know me. They know if I'm in an upswing often before I know,
Mm.
right? So, and I'm bipolar 2, so I have hypomania, and bipolar 2 lives often in depression. So like I always just say I'm high functioning depressed. So I'm
Mhm.
like that's my normal, right? Is being depressed. So yeah, so back to your book. So do you still view yourself as a maniac today?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I'm a maniac. I don't have manic episodes as much. In fact, since I got started on lithium, I only had one manic episode, and it was when I started the book, and that was because my knee was up in my quad, and my parents knew that I was a substance abuser, so they withheld painkillers, which was a good decision probably, but it caused a lot of suffering. Sometimes I want to feel manic. Sometimes being on a mood stabilizer can feel like you just want emotion in your life again.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
it can be tough. And there's side effects like I have trouble painting right now because something is blocked in my, I still have creativity. You can see that in the book, but there's something that I had before when I wasn't medicated that I don't have now. And it's tough to see yourself, in a new light in a way that you didn't see yourself before, or you lose a certain part of your identity. But like, I'm stable now, you know.
Well, and that's the trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Like that is sometimes the trade-off is that to you I get that. When you say I sometimes I want to be manic, I get that. Because you feel just incredible in the moment, technically.
Yeah.
That's what you feel like invincible. You have emotion, all of these things. So I get that. But then yes, so the trade-off is do I become stable and maintain a sustainable, healthy life? But then there's chains put on my personality,
Yeah.
right? To a degree. So there is a trade-off. It's not just, you get lithium or any medication and all of a sudden you're Tyler again. You're
Hmm.
a version of Tyler, right?
Yeah.
So you started out, man, I don't even, there's so many different things I want to talk about here. So I think I want to well, let's talk about your first day playing rugby. What was that like?
Yeah. I was looking for that community to belong to. I was the captain of my high school football team. It was an inner city team where I was one of the only white guys, and to belong to something, we called it La Familia because there was a lot of Hispanics, and that community just gave me so much joy, and it gave me something to train for. And so, when I didn't have that, I was kind of just like, okay, well, what's next? Like intramural sports weren't enough for me. So when I found rugby, my dad had played rugby when I was little. And so I've had a ball in my hands in the past, and I knew the game fairly well, and I knew what position I wanted to play. But I roll up to practice. I'm driving my dad's Mercedes. I get out, someone calls me Richie Rich. All of a sudden I have a nickname, right? And, the first drill I participated in, I made this behind the back pass, this slick pass to someone, and they scored. And instantly I kind of was just like, wow, everything that I'm good at about sports applies to rugby. I knew I was great the moment I touched the ball. And from then on, it was like, okay, how far can I take this? Because I was already doing things that great players weren't capable of doing. And, I have that competitive streak where it's like, I'm gonna push this as far as it goes. And I
And
did.
you can see that in this book as well.
Yeah.
Rugby sort of became a focal point, an obsession almost, an outlet where you could lose yourself and feel great about yourself. And that um, conveys through the words of the book. Now, I will tell you, for anyone who doesn't know anything about rugby like me, there's certain things in the book that you're going to be like, huh? What happened in this game? And you can only imagine, when I was reading it, I was like, so I mean, if you love rugby or you have any familiarity with rugby, there are lots of rugby references in here. And half fly, that's what
Fly
was
half.
your fly half. Okay, so I was close. Okay,
Yeah.
so but there were like plays, like you were calling out some plays in here. I had to ask my friends exactly what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and like he's calling out plays, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so plays, as I understand it, is how things happen on the field when you're playing rugby, or if you were to tell someone we're going to do this, it was so there's lots of technical rugby terms in here. And then I did find it really interesting how rugby seemed to be everywhere you went,
Yeah.
right? Even with the Tennessee Grizzlies, right?
Yeah.
Um, that was a really cool point for me. I'm like, I didn't know there was a gay rugby team or a gay friendly rugby
Yeah.
team, right? In Tennessee, of all places. Um, so the rugby story was really cool um, to me. The part where you met your first girlfriend, talk about that for a second.
I worked for the largest company in Israel. It was a cybersecurity company, and my dad got me a job there. My brother was already working there. My dad was kind of, a high up account manager. And when I got into New York City, all of a sudden I didn't know anyone. I thought I was completely out of my shoes. I was younger than everyone on my team, but I met this girl who was a year older than me, and she had been a college athlete herself. Her dad was the VP of North and South America sales. Both of her brothers were at the firm. So between the two of us, we had, 7 family members in the company, right? So it
Yes.
felt a lot like we were kind of Camelot,
Mm-hmm.
and she showed me all around New York City. We had a beautiful time, with each other. Um, but there were cracks when I finally got promoted and moved back to New England. There was strain on the relationship, and it was the first person I had said I love you to. So when I ruptured my patellar tendon for the first time and went manic, I'll tell you what happened. Basically, my girlfriend was changing my socks one day because my knee didn't bend, obviously, and we found that I had um, blood clots in my ankle. So my Achilles was like the size of my thigh, and I just snapped. I freaked out, and our relationship was never the same after that. And it's tough to break up with someone when you have a company that you work for together, that you have to interact day to day, and you have all these family members, that are around the office and that sort of thing. So I felt like I had to escape. I was still manic, and I just got a one-way ticket to Idaho. And I
Yeah.
stayed with my friends. They were building a canoe that they would one day travel from Montana to the Gulf of Mexico across the Missouri River in. And so I quit my job while I was out there, and I just helped them build this canoe. And then, we went on a bunch of adventures, and I just tried to find continuous distractions to keep me from remembering, what just happened, because I quit rugby. She had told me that, she was like, when you recover, like, I just can't compete for your weekends with rugby. She's like, you got to choose one. And I chose her, but she decided she didn't want to be around anymore. So when she left, I was like, all right, well, I'm done with rugby. I'm going to show that to her. And that was a mistake I made. And, it took me several years to get back to the game that I loved. And I had missed, my prime as an athlete. So that was tough. But, the second time around, I found that I really needed the community to belong to.
Can I back up just a little bit? Because there's parts on there because so it was Checkpoint Systems that you were working with, correct?
Checkpoint software, yeah.
Checkpoint Software, sorry, okay. And it started in Union City and you went down to New England, trying to remember every detail. And then this happened to you. Now, see, this is where my brain was. So you have this massive injury.
Yeah.
And in your mind, you thought it was a great idea to fly to Idaho to some remote
Very remote.
house. Yes, with two guys to help them build a canoe. It was a
Yeah.
canoe, right? And I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, what? I'm like, who does that? I'm like, and that whole time, and I'm not going to give everything away in the book because I want people to read it. But the thing with the police officer, like, as I was reading this, Tyler, I'm on my couch. I have anxiety a part of with my, and I'm on the couch and I'm reading the book, and I swear I'm like, no, like I start freaking out. I'm like, I'm terrified for you. And I think to myself, I'm like, oh God, I'm like, please don't. And then I won't say what happens. But yeah, I was like having visceral reactions to this book. And so, but then shortly thereafter, now I have to try and remember if I get it. But you ended up going with one of the men in that house. You did a cross country type trip with, and you went and took a trip to the canyon.
Grand Canyon, yeah.
So then, like, talk about anxiety. I'm like reading the Grand Canyon part, and I'm like, first of all, you'd never catch me dead in the Grand Canyon because there are like snakes and things. And I would go look at it and fly over it. It would be great. So you're here just doing your thing in the Grand Canyon and you're having these experiences. And I'm sitting on the couch reading and just like heart pounding. And like, if you were to go back right now to that very moment, what do you remember feeling?
um, I had skipped my rehab on my knee because
Yes.
I flew out that way. And so, my friend Hunter, he's a great athlete, and he was physically able, and he had done like long treks before. And I hadn't. So I didn't pack as much food. I didn't wear as many warm clothes, and I was suffering. Like, we were going rim to rim to rim. That's a long trip. It's a lot of elevation, a lot of like,
47 miles?
huh?
Is it 47 miles? Am I remembering
I
that?
think it's 47. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, it is a long trip.
Yeah, with like 6,000 feet of elevation gain. Um, and I had some weed like in my pocket from, I can't remember where, maybe from the party we went to in Southern California. And I just remember, like, I can't make it another step. And I smoked this joint, and then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, well, the flowers are beautiful. The cactuses are beautiful. Oh, there's an antelope or something. Like, um, but like when I was actually trying to make it back, the night we stayed on the North Rim, when the North Rim was closed, I thought I was going to die. Like, I really thought I was going to die. I was praying to God. and I was shivering, and I had no food left for the next day, and I was like, I'm gonna die. And then I met that guy who I called the Japanese Hercules, and I was like, well, shit, I'm an athlete. If this guy can do it, I can do it. And that gave me some force, for the next 20 some odd miles. But yeah, I didn't think I was going to make it. And somehow, God's will, I got through it. And then I just threw up everywhere, and I felt so sick, but I felt accomplished at the end of the day.
In his friend's car, by the way. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This month, join our Valentine's Quilt Sweepstakes, hosted by Poddin My Noggin and made by CK Sims. Enter for the chance to win the Valentine's Quilt and matching pillow by subscribing to Poddin My Noggin's YouTube channel. The sweepstakes will run from February 1st to February 28th, when the winner will be announced. Additionally, you can receive 10 extra entries by purchasing the Easy Beginners Digital Quilt Pattern Valentine's Edition. Check out the sweepstakes rules below and access the link in the description to enter today.
Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking to, and still are, Tyler Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, perfect. Good. The maniac with no knees. He has knees, mind you. We just need to clear the air. But this is the title of his book. And we're talking about, I guess, almost the first half of the book, but high level. There's lots of details we did not get into. So one of the things that I want to point out, if you've been following along too, is that how old are you today on this day right now?
32.
And when did you write this book?
This past year. I finished it in November.
Okay, perfect. Because most of what happens to you, and so you finished it in November, so the book you finished 2 years post mental institution?
Yeah, I was institutionalized at 30.
At 30. So like most of what you talk about in your book happens to you, like so much has happened to you in your very young age. Like, do you know what I mean? Like so much. You made a statement. We're going to go back to Checkpoint Software. I got it right. You made a statement that I totally resonate with. You had made a statement somewhere where it was you were making way too much money for your age. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
And $250,000 is definitely a lot of money for a 23, 24-year-old. And I thought to myself, I remember having this pausing during while I was reading and thinking to myself, I'm like, my life at 23 and 24 was already a dumpster fire. So if I had access to $250,000 a year, how much more would it have been a dumpster fire? And would I even still be here today? That was a question I pondered. So you were involved in sales. You were really good at it. Then you got involved into some cryptocurrencies. I want to tell you that the story, we won't talk about it today. The story that you told me, or told you tell in this book about what happened to you, broke my heart. It gave me anxiety. I I just like I was sitting there almost like grabbing myself thinking, oh, I'm like, how could this happen? This is terrible, all of those things. What I want to talk about now though is something probably one of the biggest focal points of the book for me. And I think maybe one of the biggest focal points for you, one of the biggest things that sort of shifted for you. And if I want to make sure I don't want to check my notes, but ECSU.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Women's rugby.
Yeah.
So, Tyler, honestly, I mean, as you wrote the book, I got to give you credit. Your writing style is quite nice. Um, it's almost as if you intentionally wrote the book so that it came across slightly manic.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but how it read was very speedy. All of those things. The only time that I felt like it slowed down was, for me anyway, when I was reading it, was the ECSU women's rugby.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing that happened there, what I got stuck on was how much it hurt you
Yeah.
as a human being.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm not, bringing up anything painful. And if
No.
I ask you anything, you can tell me. Today, as you are sitting here in front of me, have you been able to reconcile that experience?
And I call it out in the book. I talk about, and I do this deliberately, the girls specifically that really had my back.
You do, yes, you do.
Because it was polarizing. It wasn't like the whole team wanted me gone. A lot
No.
of them wanted me there still. And to me, the people that didn't want me, their motives came out of vengeance rather than something true to who they were. Some of the girls that turned against me, I had considered really close to me, almost like friends. And so that hurt a lot, but I did my best to show that in some ways both sides were at fault. There was no excuse for my behavior.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I felt like I deserved some extra rope.
Or decency,
Decency. Yeah.
right? I think that that's the piece, right? So, and it really resonated with me because I had a much smaller but similar experience happen to me when I was much younger. And it took me a really long time to reconcile and make peace with it. And when you were talking about the level of hurt you experienced in that moment, the level of anger, even, because I had a lot of anger from my experience, it just reminded me that sometimes it doesn't matter who's at fault. Sometimes we just feel things really hard, right? What happened to you in that situation? You're correct. Your behavior was not good, right? The different things that you did throughout that period of time. I can understand why they were done, and you were battling with bipolar one, you were in mania, all of those particular things. It makes sense to me how you got there, right? And how it also makes sense to me how in the moment you wouldn't have been cognizant of what it was that you were doing, right? Like the thing, but the way that they handled it was just rotten,
Yeah.
right? So my question to you is, have you been able to make true peace with it, or is it still something that kind of gnaws at you from time to time on the inside?
Yeah. Like I said, the girls that were with me, they've helped bring closure for me to the matter. They insist how good of a coach I was and how good of a mentor I was, and that helps bring me comfort. But for instance, we're 3 years later now, and the school is 8 minutes from my house, and I went to a few games this past fall, and there was one girl left on the team who, you know, I was close to her and her sister, who was an older girl on the team, and I went to go cheer her on a few times. And the last time I went to go cheer her on, there was a girl on the sideline who hadn't graduated yet but wasn't still playing, who asked me if I was allowed to be there, and that crushed me. And that felt like it was just a stab at me, like, why are you here? And for me, I love rugby. I love cheering rugby on. I love cheering on friends that are playing. And that's all I was doing. And to feel like someone didn't believe I deserved to be there, they didn't even want me to be a fan, that hurt me a lot. But
I,
like I said, those girls that have my back, they get me through it.
well, it's good that you have those girls. I think one of those girls actually wasn't it Abigail Broder?
No, no. She's a friend.
Yeah, she's a friend. Okay, you're right. Yes, for a second I thought Abigail Broder was one of the girls, but it's not.
No,
You're
they're
right.
too young to get a PhD.
Okay, fair. Absolutely fair. Um, and this is how my brain works, right? So if I don't make notes of everything, I forget where things fall into place. So I'm glad that you were able to make peace with that. I feel like for everything that you've been through, and then today you wrote this book, for people who are going to read this book, which I hope are a lot, mind you, they're going to see a side of someone. If you look at the picture of this young man on the back of this book, right? That's just a regular guy. That's what you see. Just a regular guy. Ostensibly, I got everything together. Everything's just fine. What I like about what you're doing is that you're showing that just because you might appear to be just a regular guy, right? There's always more than meets the eye. We shouldn't judge a book by its cover, right? So maybe if I met you when you were 25 years old, you would have been possibly manic and you would have been successful making lots of money with your cryptocurrency and you would have been coaching or playing rugby and all of those particular things. What would my initial impression of Tyler be?
You think I had it together? Most people have always thought I had it together. Most people thought I was a charismatic, athletic, semi successful, guy. And that was part of the reason why I wrote this book, because you know for one, I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to, you know, share my point of view when some of these horrific things happened to me. I wanted to stand up for the outcasts of my affliction that are suffering and that think they're alone. Um, but also, I wanted to show people what I've been through, because, it was worth a story. Like I, 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 I realized when I was manic that I had a story that was worth telling, and that was the most honest thing I've ever said.
So my question is then, to be considered by people at home, by yourself, by me. You just told me that if I had met you at 25, I would have thought you were charismatic, semi-successful.
I mean, I was
Uh,
doing well, yeah.
what was the other? There was another adjective you just used. It was charismatic, athletic. You listed a few things. Were you not those things though?
It all depended on the day. Like, when I was in Boston and I was manic half the time, I was buying a dozen copies of the Boston Globe to clean up a spilled Sprite bottle, you know, but I was
Okay.
also managing seven-figure transactions and working with executives. And so I was putting on this front like everything was okay.
Yes.
And
Okay.
yeah, and some people could see it. Like when I moved back home and all of a sudden I had to go into the office every day, yeah, people knew I was getting high at work, and people knew that I was smoking Black and Milds in the parking lot and going across the street to grab drinks at lunch. But I was excelling at my job, and so no one was really saying anything about it.
Well, see, this is the point I'm trying to make, is that you were undiagnosed bipolar 1 at that time, having manic episodes, self-medicating, but you were still charismatic, athletic, and I would not say semi-successful, I would say successful. Because you were like making $250,000 a year, getting promotions left, right, and center. That's successful, my friend.
Yeah.
So the moral of this whole story is how you responded to both having success, charisma, athleticism, and manic episodes. Because you can still have all of those things. One doesn't negate the other, is what I'm trying to say. So I would say reclassify. I think what would happen is if I met you at 25, I might have met you and thought, I'm like, okay, this guy's got his shit together. He's really successful. I might have had the thought, like, oh, he's a lot. I might have thought that, right? Whereas I would have judged you just simply by your cover and not by who you are really. Whereas if you read this book, you can see both versions of you throughout, right? Like who you were in high school. It's upside down, of course. Here's the thing. What I loved about some of the things that you said, you showed a lot of vulnerability in this book just by writing it to start with, right? There's a lot of vulnerability. There were so many things that you said in this book right in the beginning. The way you viewed the world, for instance, I thought as a teenager was incredible. There was a sensitivity to you. You just felt culture in how you viewed your peers. There was the how you viewed what was happening to you in the beginning, right? How you talked about rugby. It was almost poetic. Like you do really well in this book to convey your love for that sport, right? And how much it gave you as a human being. And then one more sad moment, I guess, if we're gonna take a second. When you were in Boston, no, it wasn't Boston. Give me a second. Wasn't Boston. You went to Austin.
Maybe when I came home, when I had to live at home again.
When you, when you decided to drive.
Oh, Memphis.
Memphis, thank you. Sorry. There's a lot of places mentioned in the book, y'all. So yes, Memphis, Tennessee. Your description of Memphis, Tennessee was surprising to me. I've been to Nashville, Tennessee, but I've never been to Memphis, Tennessee. So it was really surprising to me. And then that whole experience was another like roller coaster of emotion where I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, Tyler, don't do it, Tyler. Like having like a moment of shaking, thinking to myself, I'm like, no. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that was your tipping point.
That was it.
That was the thing. Really, as reckless as it was also what saved you.
Isn't that funny?
That moment. It's not funny. Because I find that that's how life works sometimes. It's just these really strange experiences that we have or decisions that we make that we find that we get an opportunity or a blessing and we choose to spin something new from it, if you will. I will tell you the only disappointment that I had with your book, because I like to be transparent. You made me wait way too long to tell me about the insane asylum. And then I felt like there could have been more depth there. You could have brought us deeper. But this is a style choice, right? So for me, I'm like, it's your life, it's your story. I really wanted to know, there's several sections in the book when you talk about catatonia, lying in bed, your mixed episodes. You don't call them mixed episodes, but I can recognize that you were having mixed episodes when you were in those experiences. And I felt like, and maybe this is what you can talk about in podcasts more, is more of that depth, like describing exactly what that felt like. I knew what it felt like. I've been there, right? And so that's my only piece of feedback. Now you can tell me to go F myself, and be like, that's not what I wanted to write, CK. But the book is amazing regardless.
Yeah. I mean, I think I tried my best. It's tough when you're living through the narrative to
Yeah.
think about introspection. Um, and it's also tough when you're loaded up on mood stabilizers for the first time and trying to cultivate how you're really feeling in that moment. And so what I did, and I thought what the message of that experience was I'm taking in all these people. Like I introduced more people in that chapter than any other chapter. And I'm taking these people in and I'm seeing how bad they are. And I'm reflecting on my own life and what I have to be fortunate for, because that's what it was at the end of the day. It wasn't just that I finally got diagnosed with bipolar and I finally got medicated with lithium. It was this awakening of Tyler, like, you have things to be thankful for.
You did convey that
Yeah.
in the end. In the end, I'm not disappointed by the book. Just to be clear, I was just disappointed that there wasn't more depth. But now that you say what you're saying, I hadn't thought about it, right? Because I think that's the thing. When you wrote the book, I wasn't 100% clear where you were still when you wrote the book. So this makes more sense to me now, because I think if you're on lithium, which for people who don't know, lithium is a very strong medication, saves a lot of lives, right? But it chains your creativity, chains parts of your personality. You don't feel or emote the same way you used to, if you will. Some people have really bad situations where they just don't feel anything. They feel like they're a zombie, right? I've seen you crack a smile a few times since we've been on this call, and that's given me lots of sort of joy to know that lithium hasn't taken that away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Definitely not disappointed. There's one section in the book I want to talk about. So it's on page 213, which is pretty much the end. And it says, I may not ever have what other people have, but my journey has been priceless. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I mean, this thing can be difficult to live with. If 65% of bipolars, or sorry, something like 90% of bipolars who get into a marriage divorce. And that sounds like a high number, but I urge you to look it up. And I've had my own difficulties with relationships, and I don't know if I'm ever going to have a baby or have a kid. And to me, that's our purpose in life. We want to leave a legacy behind us, and that's what a kid can do for you. Something that can grow far beyond your lifetime, something that can have infinite levels of possibilities behind a life. And so this book to me has been like a child. It's been like a legacy that will be around after I'm gone. And so the journey that I've had, that I've put into this book, that's going to live forever. And that's priceless. It sucks to say that I don't know if I'll ever have a kid, but I still have a lot to be proud of.
You definitely do. You definitely do. And it's interesting that that's where you went with what you just said, because as you were talking about having a child, I'm like, this is your baby, right? And there can be more babies. Relationships are hard. And relationships are hard without mental illness. Relationships become extremely difficult when you have bipolar 1 disorder. It's not to say, however, that Tyler is never going to meet a person who is going to love him exactly as is and learn, because the commitment is to love Tyler wholly, right? And that means they love Tyler as the guy I'm talking to today, but they also love Tyler as the manic Tyler, and they love Tyler as the depressed Tyler. And they develop mechanisms and whatever needs to happen to be able to make that work. You're young. You're 32 years old. You have a wealth of experience. You've written a book. Who knows? Maybe there's going to be another book in a couple years when you've gotten, some of this behind you and you've built up more things that you can talk about and share with others. Life after the maniac with no needs. Who knows? It could actually read one day, Tyler, the dad with no needs.
Yeah.
Know that it's not impossible for you.
Right.
Right? Know that you being here on this podcast, I'm nobody, but I'm just saying, you showing up, talking about your story, sharing it with the world, and writing this book and overcoming everything that you've overcome so far is just testament to the fact that you are not down for the count. And you do have a lot of really great things to look forward to. My note on what that said, I'm going to read it again, is I might not ever have what other people have. And now I know what you mean by that. But my journey has been priceless. So my response to that is, who is to say what they have is better than what you have, right? Who's to say that? Who's to say that, is it Ryan Sheridan?
Brian.
Am I getting his?
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah. He's your person, right?
He's my rugby person.
But who's your sorry, I'm
Hunter
maybe
Yale.
I'm getting pardon?
Hunter Yale.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
So that moment in your book, where you just pause the story to talk about how much of an incredible human he has been to you and what he means to you. There are people out there who don't have a Hunter Yale, who will never experience anything like a Hunter Yale. There are people out there who don't have the parents that you have, right? I'm not talking about socioeconomic statuses. I'm talking about the things that you have achieved. Please tell me you still have the puppy. The puppy's name is gone from my brain, but do you still have the puppy?
Betsy. Yeah. Yeah, she's right outside this door.
Okay. Well, I was so happy that you got Betsy. I really, really was.
Yeah, she saved me.
So what's next?
Gosh, I don't know. I have a couple things going on. I'm writing a book of short essays. Every single day I publish a short essay to Instagram, and a lot of it is about mental illness or addiction or suicide. I went through something really rough while I was writing this book, so I've written quite a bit about that. Um, and then besides that, I'm trying to figure out a way to make money off of writing, and that can be difficult. But what I've found, which is interesting, is that there's a market for like extended obituaries. Where you interview a bunch of family members and you tell someone's life story in like 8 to 10 pages, just so that maybe their grandkids who didn't know them so well can have something to remember their grandpa by, because I think a lot of our best stories die with, the old when they pass on. Um, and so I think, there's an opportunity for something like that. I'm going through my first one now. I've got 2 interviews left to do on that. So, we'll see. I'm trying to give my writing my best shot, but I might end up back in cybersecurity sales at some point. It's grown difficult for me because of some of my behavior when I've gone manic. I've burnt a lot of
They need
bridges.
to know though. I mean, in this day and age, there should be. You talked about that. Not to cut you off, but there should be programs for people like you and companies with like parameters in place for people like you. When we struggle sometimes, when we go in mania or hypomania, we want to quit or we make irrational decisions or we have poor behavior. If we go to our manager and say, this is happening, like there should be a protection to say, okay, you know what? You're suspended without pay or with pay or whatever the situation is for X number of whatever, depending on your doctor. And you just go. So you know what I mean? I like
Yeah,
the
corporate
perfect
America, in
world.
particular the cybersecurity industry, it's difficult. It's a small world, and
It is a small world, but I hope anybody watching from the cybersecurity industry listens to what I just said and then knows that Tyler can be an extraordinary salesperson. He just needs to be supported in a different way, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. So you can make a ton of money for somebody, but they have to support you just a little bit different than they would the average person.
yeah, look,
I
I
feel
think I think I'm very capable, and I've had some shots recently. Maybe some of them will pan out, but people don't have as thick skin as I'd like them to, and it can be really disheartening. But I figured out my life to this point, and I'm confident that I'm going to figure it out. Like I said, like I'm not ashamed of what I've been through. I'm proud of it because it's made me into a person with a lot more resiliency, a lot more empathy. And honestly, I've had to reinvent myself over and over again. And there's no hurdle that I can't conquer at this point. Like I'm convinced of that much. It's all about opportunity, you know?
I think you're going to find that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think you're the type to just make the opportunity. That's what I get. That's what I've read. That's what I experienced in this podcast. Please keep doing what you're doing. I hope your book reaches lots of people and helps lots of people. I hope that you continue to grow in who you are and your full potential. And if the universe, I know that there's going to be someone in this world who's going to be able to love you the way you need to be loved. Right. And I just feel that in my gut. So whenever they come along, I don't know when, it might be when you're 50. No one has a time clock for this.
Yeah.
But I hope that they come along and that all works out for you.
Yeah.
Tyler, thank you for sending me this book.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can go out and purchase this on Amazon. The Maniac with No Knees, and it's Tyler Kenya.
Yeah, Kenya.
Say it for me
Kenya.
one more time. Kenya.
Yeah.
Kenya. Tyler Kenya. I will get it right this time. Maniac with No Knees. Get it on Amazon. Leave reviews. Share it with your friends. And everybody, thank you, Tyler, for being on the show. And everyone at home, get out there. Until next time, live your wildest dream.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.